Hi, this is Paul Young, and you're listening to Backbeat.
All music is the same. It's just a new set of lyrics and a new backbeat.
Well, welcome to Germany. Years ago, at the beginning of your career, you were part of the band The Q-Tips.
Yeah.
At one point in time, you decided to leave the band and pursue a solo career. Was that a hard decision?
It was a hard decision because I felt a responsibility to the band. So I decided that what I should do is like a Rod Stewart thing. I'd take a solo deal but still do the Q-Tips. But by that time, some of them were disillusioned because we couldn't afford to keep to stay together. Mm-hmm. So while I was working on my solo stuff, they went out on tour with Adam N. They became he was the drummer in the brass section. And then we just never got back together again.
Do you keep in touch with your old bandmates?
Most of them, yeah.
Yeah, still?
Yeah, the drummer took offence at me taking a solo deal, but the rest of them were kind of okay about it.
On the live album here, Live at Last, there's a song entitled SYSLJFM.
Yeah.
What does that stand for?
It's an old Joe Tex song called Save Your Sweet Love Just For Me. And it's, in fact, we do it in the acoustic show as best we can. But it's like all those little sealed with a loving kiss things that you put on the back of a letter. Mm-hmm. And so he just wrote a whole chorus around all these little things. Mm-hmm.
You were, for your first couple of albums, you were backed up by the royal family.
Yeah. And
do they still work for you now?
No, they after No Carlo, the girls took a solo. Mm-hmm. Took a solo deal and they went off. They did a few tracks on the second album, but we decided to start using male vocals. But it was still the same drummer, bass player, keyboard player, and it even was for the third album. But by the fourth album, we decided to go back down to just me, the keyboard player, and the producer. Mm-hmm. But I didn't feel it was working anymore. Mm-hmm. So we worked for a year, and I scrapped everything and started again.
On your first solo tour in '84, I had the opportunity to see your show in Montreal. You played at the Spectrum. I don't suppose you remember that.
I do remember playing the Spectrum, yeah. I remember playing Canada for the first time, and the second tour as well.
I was blown away by that show. It was a great show. I've never seen you. I wasn't aware of who you were, and a British friend of mine, he said, "You want to go to a concert?" I said, "Paul Young." I said, "Never heard of him." I walked away that night converted. I was definitely a Paul Young fan.
Well, the big problem that I still wrestle with is because I had a lot of ballad hits, and people still have no idea that the full live show with the band is quite exciting. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing. You think you've played to a lot of people, to big audiences, but still the overriding memory is of me being a ballad singer and wearing suits, and so people don't. It's a shame because I think it would be a good live show, or it is a good live show for people to see. But it's very difficult to keep that in people's memory.
But what was the reception as an unknown artist? How were you received for that tour?
Well, very well. The Q-Tips did me a good service because we just worked and worked and worked. So by the time I went out on the first solo tours, I felt quite comfortable being on the stage, and it went down very well. I think they were quite surprised most of the time when we went on tour that it was quite a vibrant show. Mm-hmm.
After touring to support the Secrets of Association album, you began having throat problems, and then you had to take time off. Do you feel you've licked that problem, or is it something you still have to deal with?
I think the biggest problem I have is that we pitch all the songs really, really high. Mm-hmm. And you can drop the keys a little bit, but you can't drop them too much. And the stamina of the live show used to take a lot out of me to be able to do that and sing high all the time. Mm-hmm. And that was when I first came across that problem. So it's just a case of getting enough rest. And the thing is, when you get famous and then you've got the live shows, then they put in TV shows and they put in interviews and breakfast shows, and in the end it just becomes too much.
Just cram it.
You don't know how much physically you can handle. Mm-hmm. So I am aware of that now. When I'm on the road, I try not to do too many other things apart from the concerts themselves.
Who would you say inspired you musically, or who inspires you musically?
In the beginning, it was English blues bands. A lot of English blues singers listened to a lot of soul singers, so I got into soul music. So my overriding influences would be Paul Rodgers from Free, Otis Redding, Joe Tex, Wilson Pickett, that kind of thing. But now musically, I'm influenced a lot by Ry Cooder, and all different kinds of ethnic music, and a lot of English pop music. Well, English, I don't know what you call it now. I shouldn't say pop, but bands like Supergrass and Blur and Radiohead. I think it's very interesting what they're doing.
Most of your albums, I'd say all of your albums till now, have always featured cover versions of other songs.
Yeah.
How do you decide? How do you come upon the decision to record a song, a particular song? And does your personal touch to that song play a large part in that?
It does, yeah. If I was just to do my favourite songs, then it would be Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, and all these. But then I don't want to touch those songs because they are my favourite songs. So I don't see how I could do it any better. So it's more a case of finding the songs that you think are gems, the needles in the haystack, and then thinking, okay, it's a good song. Is it also my kind of song? And so once again, you can find good songs, but I've still got the songs in my mind, and that I love. But there's a couple of songs, and I just keep thinking, I'd love to do that, but it's too much of a girl's song, or it doesn't apply to a male, or there's something else, So one, it's got to be good. Two, it's got to be my kind of song. And then it's a case of how do we do it? And we always, when we did those songs, tried to ignore the version that we knew. So the first thing we would have to do is change the drum pattern, and then go from there.
Well, what about covering an Elvis song?
It's been mentioned.
Really?
Yeah, it's been mentioned. But I would like to find one that was a lesser known Elvis song. In the same way that on the last album we did a Frank Sinatra song, but we didn't do Strangers in the Night or Come Fly With Me. We did,
like everybody else.
We did It Was a Very Good Year, which is not such a well-known Frank song. But once again, we did it with drum loops and samples and made it sound as different as possible.
What about a Christmas song, seeing as this is the holiday season?
Yeah, well, if you imagine how long I've been around, and every year I consider doing a Christmas song, and I just can't find one that I think would be...
That would fit.
And they can, out of all the Christmas records that have ever been made, you could count the good ones on two hands.
Are you familiar with A Very Special Christmas?
Yeah.
That's a good album.
Yeah, I did Candles Burning Low, dum, 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 lots of mistletoe. What's it called? That's What Christmas Means to Me. So I'd already released it as a live EP that came with other voices. So we re-recorded the song with Don Was for A Very Special Christmas, but I felt it wasn't as good as my live version. So after they'd pressed the first copies, I said, if you re-release it the year after, can you substitute my live version? And so that's what happened.
When you're recording, are you a perfectionist when it comes to your music, or you rather capture the moment?
I would like to think I capture the moment. I'm not so much of a perfectionist. Laurie Latham, the producer that I worked with, was a perfectionist. He'd go over and over and over one little section, whereas I'm more of a... Yeah, it's more the feel of it for me. But then you can become a perfectionist in the feel of it. And I've got one really good song that we chased for the last album and ended up not doing it, which means we have to try and do it again for the next album. So that does occasionally happen.
Now, touring is hard for any performer.
Yeah.
How do you keep fit, and what do you do in your spare time?
I used to keep very fit on the road. It doesn't matter so much with these acoustic shows, but I still do run and do some general stretching and a little stomach and stuff every day or every other day. And I don't go a long run. I just do it just enough to get your lungs going. But back then, when we did Secret Association tour and those tours, I would go on a 3-month training schedule, and for the Secret Association, a dance schedule as well, to get me fit for the road. Then the live shows would pretty much take care of themselves, although occasionally I would still run and try and keep as fit as possible.
Over the last approximately 20 years of your career, you've released 6 studio albums, 2 compilations, and whatever other. There's an acoustic album. When could we expect a live album from Paul Young?
Well, it wouldn't be a great time to do it now. I mean, the great time would have been to have done it on the Secret Association tour or somewhere around there. So I think I would consider a live album if it happens again that I get a hit and we can upscale the live show, to make it something special. It's very difficult to recreate a lot of those records because there's so many overdubs and layers, and so I need quite a big band, and it would only be worth doing it if I had like a good 7-piece, 8-piece band behind me.
Well, do you have any recordings of your prior shows?
We have some, but we did use a lot of them. We used to put them out as limited edition 12-inch vinyl things, and there's still a great version of me doing I Close My Eyes and Count to 10 that was on a live album. It wasn't an album, we just used them for extra tracks, but they repackaged it as a live album for Japan, and it's got some great stuff on it.
What would you say is your career highlight till now?
In the public's eye, I would say it would have to be Live Aid, but for personal enjoyment, I would have to say the Freddie Mercury tribute concert, which was it was absolute ball. It was great fun to be there, and to have the excitement of playing with a band like Queen, that is one thing in itself. But then to be able to have Freddie Mercury's fans in front of you, it's like you're stepping into someone else's shoes, and that's a big high, almost be somebody else. Okay, I've had highs, doing my shows, and it's great. But to be able to, it's like I'm walking on, I'm doing something new, but instead of the audience being unreceptive because it's new, they're right there with me, and that was incredible.
So the atmosphere was really...
Yeah, it was brilliant, yeah.
As they say, electric.
Yeah.
So what's in the cards for Paul Young, dare I say, in the next millennium? Yeah. That word again.
Yeah. The last 2 years I've had no record company, no management, although I've had management now for about 8 months. But he's just coming out with me on the shows. He didn't realise what kind of live show it was, so we did some festivals earlier this year. And so he's just thinking about the best way to market me. It's a big, as you get older and the longer you're in the business, your audience all starts to move off in different directions, and it becomes very difficult to find them. You can't just advertise in one kind of magazine because one person might read GQ, one person might read New Scientist, one person might read the Sunday Times, and it's very difficult to find them all. So he's just thinking about marketing, best way to do it. In the meantime, I've been writing songs. I've got about 14, 15 of my own, another 6 or 7, maybe 8 songs of ideas of other people's songs that I can do. So there's enough for an album. Songs of my last album as well were picked up and covered. So I've become more of a songwriter than I used to be.
So you feel you're comfortable now as a songwriter?
Yeah. I was brutally honest with myself in the early years, and I just thought that's quite a good song, but these people that it's their vocation to write songs, they do it better than I do, because I don't do it enough. So I would always find songs from outside. But now I write fairly regularly. I'm getting better. Now I've had some covers, that's given me a lot more confidence. So there's more and more of my own material that's appearing on my albums. And also I've got a Tex-Mex band. We've been going for about 6 or 7 years now, because I'm a Rycuda fan, and that's how that started. And we've been writing our own material for the last 2 years, and we've probably got enough to do an album with that band as well. and I've got a home studio nearly ready. I can do vocal overdubs and some instrumental overdubs, but I can't do drums or amplifiers yet. But eventually I hope to be able to do a lot of that from home.
Mm-hmm. So what was the decision to make this tour an acoustic tour?
Well, because I had no record company or management for the last 2 years, I just decided that I would work live, and that would be a source of income, and it would give me time to. I moved house, and set up the studio, blah blah, and so I didn't want to think about an album, and I thought I'd do it for a year, but then we ended up doing more touring this year, and just by way of making it interesting, Midge actually called me up and said, "Have you thought about doing an acoustic tour?" He said, "I've done it. I've done them. I saw him do it." And he said, "We were talking about who else could do an acoustic tour. And there's not many people that could do it." And so he put the German, the seed in my mind, and we tried it in England, and it was very successful. So we thought we'd try Europe. I don't think so many people do it out here, because we've had some people are surprised because they didn't know. But it's an interesting proposition, and we're thinking about maybe next year taking it to Holland and France and Italy.
So it's just a way to get back to the audience.
Well, I like doing it because it brings the songs back down to nothing much more than a song, and it's nice to be able to do that.
It's like the line, a good song is always a good song, whether it's live or acoustic.
Yeah, no matter what instrument it's been played on, you know. And we do have to have some variation in the show, so we do occasionally use a sample, drum sample, or we might just use a maraca pattern on a drum machine, because there's a song called "I Wish You Love" that's in 6/8 time. It's very difficult for two guitarists to try and keep 6/8. So, and then there's the Frank Sinatra song that we did. It was such a big production that we thought it would be nice for one song to have just the loops and the orchestra, and then Matt plays a piano, so it's almost like Liberace or something. Whereas on the record we had like very loud slide guitar, and it was quite a very big sound. But this way it sounds a bit more kind of cocktail jazz, but with drum loops, if that's possible. And so it's not. That's why we didn't say it's an acoustic show. We called it an intimate show, which means that the instrumentation is very pared down, and it's just a way of. It's a different way of showing off the songs.